Good evening, everyone. So lovely to see you all here after 2 full days of practice, and echoing Matt's reminder to keep on practicing as if you aren't leaving tomorrow. Keep on practicing here right now using the trainings of impermanence that you've been learning. It's been such an honor to sit with all of you almost all of you, in the practice meetings. I have a lot of appreciation for the wisdom and insight and the true devotion, the Dhammachanda energy you have. From Crowfoot, a Blackfoot leader in the 1800s, what is life? It's the flash of a firefly at night. It's the breath of buffalo in winter time. It's the little shadow which runs across the grass and loses itself in the sunset. And from physicist and astronomer and writer, still alive person, Adam Frank. From birth to the unknown moment of our passing, we ride a river of change. And yet, in spite of all the evidence to the contrary, we exhaust ourselves in an endless search for solidity. We hunger for something that lasts, some idea or principle that rises above time and change. We hunger for certainty, and that's a big problem. It might even be the problem. A modern day, still living person, a Western scientist, identifies clinging as the problem. So, inviting you this evening to listen, the shorter talk, because we have Q&A, with your whole body, your whole nervous system, and your heart. You've had a few talks. Sometimes it's easy to lose steam on them, but so wake up your whole body. We had such a beautiful body-centered late afternoon, so hopefully people's bodies are energized and refreshed. Yeah. So we'll continue to discuss ways in which impermanence, when we live in harmony with it, liberates the heart and mind from the struggles and resistance that percolate all of our lives, and the heart's freedom that blossoms from that liberation. Yeah. We've been working our way through the 5 doors to the heart that impermanence opens, and 4 of these open to the Brahma Vihara, the heart practices, and 1 opens to anatta, or not self. We had a lot of Q&A about anatta, or not self, so we'll spend some time on that for sure. To review last night's talk, Yogi Brain again, right? So we covered the 4 Brahma Viharas: metta, the practice of loving kindness, cultivating love, unconditional friendliness, and we can say that it warms the heart and helps us to remain warm even in difficult circumstances. And aligning with impermanence promotes loving kindness because our heart more easily softens when we let go, right? When we're not afraid. And this was exemplified in that beautiful poem, Kindness, by Naomi Shihab Nye. Right? And then we also took a look at how impermanence reveals anatta, not self, which then supports interconnectedness between people and helps you to cease to be contentious, right? And how it's a secret superpower in interpersonal relating, and how that not self-teaching of anatta then increases compassion. So it's doors into doors, right? And then thirdly, we did talk about compassion. In Buddhist psychology, we say that compassion is a quivering of the heart in response to suffering. It is when love meets suffering, It is not suffering. It also involves a readiness to take action to relieve suffering. And the poem, Please Call Me by My True Names, by Thich Nhat Hanh, expressed this better than I ever could, right? And this evening we'll continue, as promised, our exploration into the confluence, the joining of impermanence and the heart by exploring joy and equanimity, mudita and upekkha. In reviewing these, mudita, appreciative joy, right? It's that heart quality that cultivates the love that celebrates. So it's really when love meets joy, celebrating happiness, celebrating good fortune, both for ourselves and others. It includes also the generation of joy, as well as meeting joy with joy. And upekkha, equanimity, is also about love. A lot of people are a little confused by that because it might seem detached. But equanimity is when love meets life as it is, with all of its joys and sorrows. You know, it's a sublime form of love, the highest form of love, right? The great Thai forest master Ajahn Chah held up a glass of water, and Jen alluded to this earlier today. He said, "I love this glass. It holds the water admirably, and when the sun shines on it, it reflects the light beautifully. And when I tap it, it has a lively ring. And yet, for me, this glass is already broken. When the wind knocks it over, or my elbow knocks it off the shelf and it falls to the ground and shatters, I say, of course. And when I understand it's already broken, every minute with it is precious." Dharma teachings have always been transmitted using story, metaphor, and simile ever since the Buddha's time. If any of you have ever read direct teachings from the Dhammapada or the Pali Canon, you're familiar with this. My teaching story this evening is a dementia story. My mom is 98 now, in memory care in Vancouver, Washington, as I've said maybe a few times. And for the past 10 or 15 years, we've been watching a decline. First, it was in her processing speed and then memory due to an atypical kind of dementia. There have been ups and downs in that process for my mom and my sister and I. And while I myself haven't been in resistance to the evidence of her mortality, you know, she's had a long life and lived well. It's been so difficult having, watching her own frustration and her fear as her cognitive decline became more apparent. And while she never said the words, she was certainly coming to terms with her mortality, with the impermanence of her life. In the last year, though, she's entered a phase where she seems to only live in the moment. The future and past aren't on her radar. And this is very relieving to my sister and I, because it was a challenge to see her fear and frustration before. Recently, I spent a day with her that epitomized how living in harmony with impermanence exponentially increases joy, and how that joy spreads. I picked her up at her care facility with the plan of taking her to get her vaccine, and then to Starbucks, her favorite, and then hang out at my house in Vancouver until my sister came over and brought dinner, which is our usual pattern when we're both in town, my sister and I. When I picked her up and helped her to use her walker to get to my car, she looked up at the clouds and saw the formations and said, "Those are the most amazing clouds I've ever seen. Look at the different colors, different grays and whites." Right? My mom's an artist, still has sensitivity to color. As she got into the car, despite how very awkward it is and the help she needs to get her legs in, she said, "I love your new car. It's the most comfortable car I've ever seen." It's not a new car, but it is really the most comfortable car I've ever driven. So, we got in the car and headed to the clinic for her shot. It was quite a hassle for me and time-consuming, pulling my car up, helping her into the clinic, getting back to the car, going to park, finding a parking spot, and then walking back. She smiled the whole time I was gone. When I came back, they called her into the exam room for her shot, and I followed. She had a hard time pulling up her sleeves without scraping her thin skin, which bruises easily. And taking her blood pressure was equally difficult. When they gave her the shot, she apparently didn't feel a thing, and this tickled her pink, and she talked about it repeatedly every 10 minutes the rest of the day. That was the easiest shot I've ever had. After that, we drove through Starbucks. We got her usual caramel frappuccino, her go-to drink for over 20 years. Never has anything but that. She sipped it for a while as I drove. After a few minutes, she said, "This is the most delicious drink I've ever had." We just had one a couple days ago. And that was followed by, "Look how green and beautiful these trees are." We pulled into my driveway, and as she struggled to the door in her walker, she spied a neighbor's rose garden. It was the pinkest rose she'd ever seen. And my dad was a rose gardener growing up. We had so many beautiful roses. My dog, Daisy, welcomed her with lots of kisses. She said, "He gets sweeter every time I see him." I set her up with a puzzle, the kind with large pieces, which she can still work on for hours. It happened to be a puzzle of dogs. And this was, of course, the most realistic puzzle she had ever seen. My sister brought her favorite soup from Panera, the broccoli cheddar. It was the best soup she'd ever had. The art rock I showed her that I had recently finished was the most beautiful rock she'd ever seen, right? The Christmas tree, undecorated, was the prettiest Christmas tree she'd ever seen. My mom has no past, right? She's left the past behind entirely without any resistance. It's so clear how living only in the now freed her to take in all the joy and beauty that's here right now. Right? She doesn't seem to get hooked on the future. We might tell her about something happening next week, but it's gone from her mind as soon as we mention it. So all she has is what's happening right now. She's liberated from the suffering that comes from hanging on to the past, both its joys and sorrows, as well as seeking for the future to be a certain way. She expresses gratitude frequently for all the pleasant experiences she has. She forgets about the unpleasant experiences pretty quickly, so doesn't waste any time ruminating about them. And she used to when I was young. She could get pretty caught up on how things weren't right. She is completely freed from clinging. And she is a joy to be around right now, right? We, my sister and I, feel mudita, appreciative joy at her joy, right? It's a joy that spreads. Right? It's catching. It's medicine. I'm not saying her dementia isn't a very difficult journey and there are hard times ahead. In that earlier stage, as I said, she resisted the decline and went through all the stages of depression, irritability, self-aversion. So hard on herself for forgetting things. The teaching for me that day was the joy and gratitude that comes from living in harmony with impermanence. She doesn't have any choice in the matter. She didn't have to study the Dharma. She doesn't have to attend retreats, sitting for hours on end, attuning with the river of change. The poet Mary Oliver says, "If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. And we're not wise and not very often kind. And much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibilities left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power of the world. It could be anything. But very likely you'll notice it in the instant that love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. And anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Living in alignment with the truth of impermanence opens a secret passageway to joy. We're free to love all things without attachment, right? Jack Kornfield says, everything has a beginning and an ending. Make your peace with that and all will be well. Right? Changing focus now to equanimity, right? The fourth of the 4 heart practices. And as we said, it's a state of mind that neither clings to the pleasant nor pushes away the unpleasant. And it's considered a Brahma Vihara state because it is a kind of love. It's love for life just as it is, with all of the changing conditions, joys, and sorrows. And you can see that it really is the culmination of the other 3 heart practices, as I mentioned last night. So with loving kindness, we cultivate love. With compassion, love is meeting suffering. And with mudita, appreciative joy, love is meeting joy. Right? So with equanimity, it's really love meeting all the joys and sorrows that life brings. It is the supreme form of Brahma Vihara, really the highest love, the queen of love. Many teachers, myself included, feel that equanimity is the fruit of our Dharma practice. It's the natural outcome of living in harmony with impermanence. We feel the joys without clinging because we know they will be gone in the next moment. We can experience sorrow without resistance, knowing it too will pass. We can experience all of the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows with a welcoming, loving heart. Equanimity is a deep and subtle concept, though, frequently misunderstood and easily confused with suppression of feeling, apathy, or inexpressiveness, or non-responsiveness. And there was a Q&A question about this, too, so I think whoever wrote that will probably find the answer in this part of the talk, right? So the Zen master Shinzen Young says, equanimity is a radical permission to feel. Right? It's not about not feeling. It's a radical permission to feel. Right? Comes from the Latin word equus, meaning balance, and animus, meaning spirit or internal state. So it is about balance, but it's not about not feeling. So it's about a balance between, 1, suppressing thoughts and emotions, which is a way of coping that attempts to stuff them down, denying them or contracting around them. So a balance between suppression and identification, which is when we fixate on thoughts and emotions, not letting them arise, spread, and pass away in the natural cycle of things. We grab them, right? And This is where impermanence comes in, yeah? Because when you're aligned with impermanence, you neither stuff nor fixate on your thoughts and emotions. You're freed up then to feel life fully. That's the feeling part. You can feel fully everything. Everything. And when you apply equanimity to unpleasant experiences and sensations, they flow more readily and as a result cause less suffering. Because you're not trying to, when you suppress something, they get stuck, right? Things are stuck down there in some hole, right? When you apply equanimity to pleasant sensations, they also flow more readily. We're not trying to grab them like that, right? So they offer deeper fulfillment. So that same skill of equanimity positively affects both pleasant and unpleasant experience. There's a formula about this, and some of you know I love mindfulness formulas. I have my own. But Shinzen Young, again, offers this equation. I don't have a whiteboard, darn it. Psycho-spiritual purification, which we'll call freedom from suffering, is equal to pain times equanimity plus pleasure times equanimity. So the degree to which you have freedom from suffering is equivalent to how much equanimity you bring to pain, added to how much equanimity you bring to pleasure. So when we know at a deep, deep level that this is the only moment we have, each moment is so exquisite. When it's sweet, I want to be fully present to it. And if it's painful, all I can do is feel it fully, compassionately, and know that it will pass. I don't cloud up my mind with other things getting in the way. That's the freedom. I don't cloud up my mind. I'm not trying to get more sweetness or push away or change the unpleasant. All that striving is ceased, right? And that is true freedom from suffering. The Buddha once asked what he gained from meditation, and he replied, nothing. However, he said, let me tell you what I have lost. Anger, anxiety, depression, insecurity, fear of old age, and death. When we live with the reality of impermanence, and see that clearly with a welcoming spirit, no longer clinging. This heart muscle that we've been talking about is so much more robust, right? Kindness is easier to access even in difficult moments because we're less afraid. When we're less defended due to those not self-teachings of anatta, compassion blossoms. Kindness and compassion become more of a default mode, and we can carry these with us wherever we go. As a result of that, we see and care about the suffering of others. We want to contribute to their well-being, easing their suffering, because every moment is so priceless. You know, it spurs us to living a more wholesome life. Like the king in the story from the Thursday night talk said, what else should be done but to live by the Dharma and do wholesome and meritorious deeds? The heart that doesn't cling just holds everything, all the comings and goings with ease and freedom. And impermanence doesn't cause us to be lackadaisical, not involved with anything, or detached because it will change anyway. No, it brings a sense of aliveness. When we recognize and live in harmony with impermanence, we're better people. And when we live with the joy of the present moment and the wisdom of a mind free from clinging, our equanimity impacts those around us, right? So our Dharma practice then is truly medicine for all. Let's just sit for a moment before our Q&A.